I had healed from the way you treated me, and now you come back into my life, stir all of this stuff up again, and then I had to deal with it all over again for a second time. Like, who do you think you are? It's not my job to make you feel better about the way you treated me. It's not my job to give you closure on that. I gave myself closure. I didn't need to speak to you about it. I sorted that stuff by myself. I dealt with it all by myself because you decided you weren't going to be there anymore. And then you feel bad about it. So you come back a few months later and are like, oh, can we be friends again? Oh, I'm so sorry. And then you're not actually there to be a friend. You're just there for me to make you feel better. It's so disrespectful. I forgive myself for getting back in touch with them and for thinking the best, but I don't know if I forgive them yet, you know? That was really mean. I shouldn't have let them back in, but also I admire myself for being so open to that. Please forgive yourself and don't beat yourself up for expecting more than what they were able to give you. Because this thing of like, oh, have low expectations and then you'll never be disappointed. Like, I do think we should be able to expect some things from our friends. You should be able to expect a response. You should be able to expect some support if you're struggling. If once in a while you're like, hey, can you help with this? And they can't. Like, that's not you expecting too much. That's literally them being a bad friend. Do not let them back in. I'm making this video for myself of a few months ago. I hope it helps you reevaluate whether or not you want to get back in touch with someone, either a friend, or I guess the same thing could apply to a romantic relationship. Any relationship that has ended, it's probably ended for a reason, whether it was your choice or their choice or a mutual decision or you just drifted apart. But this video is about if this person gets back in touch with you, do not let them back into your life. I had a friend, my friend in recovery. We used to talk all the time. This person was an emotional support for me, you know, like any friend is. Then they decided that they didn't want to be friends with me anymore. Everyone, obviously, can make their own decisions. I went from being used to talking to this person every day to then not being able to talk to them at all. That was really emotionally turbulent. This was back in February of this year, so it was quite a long time ago now, but because that was such a intense time emotionally, I still have quite a lot of bitterness towards this person because of the way they made me feel, right? They decided they couldn't support me anymore, and so then I was left without their support. It really hurt, and it was really confusing and quite abrupt. If someone has got back in touch with you and wants to be friends, I would say be wary. I was going to say be suspicious, but maybe that's too much of a negative thing. But just be very wary, because what ended up happening with this person who had said they didn't want to be friends with me, they then got back in touch, and I thought, oh, okay, maybe this person wants to be friends again. But really it turned out that they just felt bad about the way that they treated me and they wanted to explain their side of the story, but they didn't want to be friends again. And I felt then that that was really unfair when I realized that that's what they'd done, because I had already given myself closure for what happened. I didn't need a conversation with them. I didn't need to hear their side. And to be honest, the way they explained it, I still have so many questions. So they didn't even answer all of the questions that I would have wanted them to answer. So it was then really unfair because it's like, hang on, you've just come back into my life because you felt bad about the way you ended our friendship, but you didn't actually want to be friends. But then they were pretending that they did want to be friends. And it was really, really unkind. So it brought back up all of these feelings of bitterness and of suspicion that I'd had before. And I obviously don't like feeling that way. Who does? But I now have all these feelings floating around that they reignited basically. And the thing is that I had been really suspicious about them getting back in touch. So when I'm saying be wary, I should have listened to my first instinct. So they got back in touch about 6 weeks after they'd ended our friendship. My immediate reaction was confusion, kind of the same as when they said they didn't want to be friends anymore. My immediate reaction was confusion because I was like, they said they didn't want to be friends. It's been literally like a month and a half. Like, why are they messaging me? So I ignored it because in my gut I was like, I don't want to talk to them. I'm really confused. At that point I had also moved on quite a bit. There was like a week of real emotional instability, like any breakup, right? It was horrible. Like I couldn't eat, or I felt like I was never hungry, so I was like having to prompt myself to eat and be like, hey, maybe the reason you're feeling weird is because you're not eating for 6 hours. You know, that feeling of like, it's just this underlying unease with everything. You forget to do like things that normally you automatically do, or things that normally bring you joy. You know, I'd have to remind myself, like, go outside, get some sunlight, read a bit, talk to other people, like things that are natural and normal and that I know to do because I know they help me. These things became like such a chore. You probably know what a breakup is like, so I'm just giving you like the picture, and then imagine that person gets back in touch with you. Like, what are you doing? I wish I had left it there in terms of I wish they'd never contacted me again. But then a few months after that, they messaged again. And by that point, I was in a better place. I was then, I guess, curious. I was sort of like, what do they want? I really should have just ignored it like I did the first time, because I think if I'd ignored it again, they probably wouldn't have got back in touch again. But I responded, and almost immediately I was shown why it was not a good idea. She wanted to talk on the phone, which I think is a very good idea. If someone has got back in touch with you and you're a bit suspicious or wary, like we talked about, or you want to have a conversation or you want to know what happened, I think the best thing to do is either exchange voice notes, or better would be to talk on the phone, because going back and forth over messages, you can misread someone's tone, you can misunderstand what someone meant. Like, it's just a lot better to speak things out properly. I am glad that she said she wanted a phone call. I was quite curious. I was like, what's she going to say? Is she going to apologize? Am I going to have like some kind of explanation? Immediately I was shown that this was not a good idea, because she wanted a phone call to talk things through, but it took us like a week to arrange a phone call. And I spoke about this in a couple of my friendship videos that I've done on my channel recently. I'm not very busy in terms of, if you want to have a phone call with me, it should be fairly straightforward, because I work at home. I'm not like this busy, always doing things person that's so hard to get a hold of or so hard to spend time with. I'm literally, you could probably say any time and I'd probably be like, yeah, sure. So the fact that it was taking us so long, it was just be like, she'd take a day to reply. And I'm like, why are you, I understand other people can be busy, but this was something that she wanted. This wasn't like coming from me being like, hey, can we arrange this? She was the one who was like, hey, can we have a call? And so I'm like, already when that was happening, I was like, why is it taking you so long if this is something that you wanted? Like, you can't want to speak that badly, or you're still so busy, which I think was part of the problem in our initial friendship, where I think maybe she had overcommitted or I was expecting too much or whatever. But it's like, if you're so busy, nothing has changed basically. Like, a very familiar dynamic came back in that I can remember we used to have a time where I called her every day, and I would often phone her at that time and she wouldn't pick up, which is fair enough. But then she would call me back, and then I would then be busy, whether it was, and I mean busy, like I was editing things, or I'd be like spending time with my family or making dinner, because I was like, I scheduled out, 15 minutes to talk to you, and then I called you and you weren't there. I was available and now I'm not. Or, it would be like literally as I'm sat eating dinner and she'd be phoning and I'm like, no, I can't speak to you now. That dynamic of like trying to arrange something or trying to be free, it was just not good for our friendship. But also it came back immediately when I had replied to her. If you do let someone back in, do not listen, this is really important, do not emotionally invest in this friendship. And it can be so tempting, or in this relationship, it can be so tempting because there was a time where you were really close to this person, so you might be like, oh cool, like we're friends again, great. But things will have changed, because you may be expecting the same kind of friendship or relationship that you had before, the same kind of time commitments. You used to meet up once a week or whatever, and you may be expecting that again, but this person may not want that. And so if you emotionally invest too soon before knowing why they actually got back in touch with you in the first place, you're just going to get hurt all over again, which is what happened with me. Essentially, I think the reason she got back in touch, like I said, was because she felt bad and she wanted to apologize, she wanted to have a conversation, and I didn't need that at that point. But I mean, obviously it was interesting to hear her side and hear what she'd been dealing with and to hear some kind of explanation, but it still left me with loads of questions, because really when someone decides to end a relationship, it could be something quite harsh that they're not going to tell you, in terms of they might be like, oh, I just don't have the energy to put into this anymore. Which I would respect if someone actually said that, or like you were too demanding, or like I don't have the time to be the friend that you want me to be. I would respect that more than just trying to like be like, oh yes, it was all me, or like I was dealing with it. Like obviously both of those things can be true, but I was still left with loads of questions about why she decided to do this. So the conversation, I think, only really benefited her, because she got to say all of her spiel and be like, oh, I'm sorry, and all of this. And yeah, it is good to apologize or to take responsibility if you know your actions have hurt people. But one, she could have done that like in a voice note if that's all she wanted to do. And two, I think sometimes you just have to live with that bad feeling. Like if you've treated someone badly or done something horrible, obviously it's a good idea to apologize. But if that relationship has ended, I don't think it's fair to the person who you treated badly. I don't think it's fair to go back and demand a conversation of them to explain because you feel so bad. They don't owe you any closure, which is what I felt like she was doing to me. And I only realized that afterwards, because we had this nice conversation. We talked for like an hour, like we were good friends and we really got on. So it was very easy to talk to her. I was expecting just to talk for like 15 minutes or something, but it just kept going on. And that was nice. Like I was like, oh, it's so nice. Obviously, like we used to be friends. It's so nice to talk to this person again. And so for like a week, I was like, this is cool. Because she said, oh, if you want to be friends again, like that will be so great, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, oh my gosh, that's so lovely. Like it felt so grown up as well. I was like, oh yes, we've like talked this through. We're going to be friends again. This will be so nice. And around that time as well, the Girl So Confusing remix, the Charlie XCX song, the remix with Lorde, came out. And that song is talking about the dynamics of female friendships and how we can misread things or think that something's about us when really this other person is dealing with all of this internal stuff that we had no idea about. That song had come out around that time. It felt just like this really nice moment of like, oh yes, this is nice. Like this is what it feels like to resolve our friendship issues. We had a difficult conversation and it was really actually productive and nice, you know? But I only realized afterwards that this person actually, that conversation was not about being friends again. And it was just about them explaining what had happened and about like trying to make themselves feel better because they felt guilty. Because a few weeks later, we hadn't really been in touch in the same way. Like we used to, like I said, message all the time, talk on the phone every day, and time had gone by. So I wasn't expecting that. I wasn't emotionally invested at this point. But then I was going through some difficult stuff that I felt like I could talk about with her. She had some background of it, basically. I reached out, which I find really difficult sometimes. But I was like, no, I'm going to talk to her. And it was just a huge mistake because, well, in hindsight, like maybe it was a good thing that this happened. But I was basically looking for some emotional support, and it wasn't a lot. Like it was literally a message. So this is not like me calling 10 times or like demanding whatever. It's not difficult to respond to a message that's like 2 lines long, you know? Her response was just very dismissive, very minimizing, very like feel good, positive vibes, which was not appropriate for the situation. And I just felt like she was minimizing the way I was feeling and really not helping at all. Like it made me really upset and really angry. And we went like back and forth a bit because I just wanted to like clarify what she was saying, but it was just more of the same. In the end, I deleted the chat because I had seen her last reply and I was like, if I leave this sitting in my, you know, WhatsApp inbox, I'm going to keep looking at it. It's going to make me annoyed and I might say something then that I regret because I'm just so angry because this is so like not how I would deal with a situation. If someone had texted me the same thing that I texted her, I would not have had the same response that she had. I thought the way she responded was really dismissive, as I said, really inappropriate for the situation. So I deleted the chat, not realizing then that meant I had deleted her number because I hadn't saved her number since she'd got back in touch. So I was like, oh, okay, now there's nothing I can do, so I'm just gonna have to wait. And I think it was a couple weeks later she messaged, which again is not what I would have done in this situation. I would have followed up the next day and be like, hey, just checking in, are you okay? But she didn't do that. She messaged a couple weeks later and I was not happy. And so then I actually said a lot of the stuff that we've talked about. I said it to her. I was like, it feels like you just wanted to have that phone call for closure. That was really unfair. I really struggled when you ended our friendship back in February. This was a really dark time for me. It feels like you're asking me to give you closure and to make you feel better about how you treated me. I just basically felt quite used by the way she treated me because it was like, oh, a real friend, if she had really got back in touch to be friends, a real friend would have responded differently when I reached out for help. In that response, I realized like, oh no, it put that whole phone call, which I said was really lovely, it put that phone call in a whole different light because I was like, oh, you didn't actually want to be friends again. I was reaching out to you as a friend and you completely dismissed what I was going through. And she thought that was really unfair of me to say and she got really annoyed. I find it interesting that in terms of like dealing with conflict or dealing with these difficult conversations where you're saying to someone, hey, this really hurt me, I find it really interesting how people seem to treat me expressing, hey, this hurt me. They seem to think that is as hurtful as the hurtful action they actually took. Like I'm just calling them out or I'm just saying like, hey, the way you acted, it affected me in this way. That really hurt. And then they act all offended. And I'm like, this is supposed to be like a healthy like back and forth, right? Like I can say, I felt this way, and then you can say, oh my gosh, I'm sorry, or I understand you feel this way. It's not a personal attack is what I mean. It's not like I'm saying, you're so horrible, I hate you. I didn't say any of that because there's no point in that. I was just trying to communicate like the reason that I'm feeling this way or the reason that I didn't respond is for this reason. I felt your actions like weren't that of a friend. And then she was like, I can't give you what you're looking for in a friendship or something. Which, as I said, I would respect if she'd said that when she ended our friendship in February. I would have respected it then, but I did not respect it now because I was like, I was literally just asking you to text something understanding. That's basically all I wanted in that situation. Not something minimizing, not something dismissive, just something that understood like you're in a dark place or you're feeling sad or this is difficult but you can get through it, not in a way of like you're so strong, you're so amazing, you could like, it just felt very dismissive and very patronizing. And then for her to be like, I don't know if I can be the friend that you need me to be. I'm like, I've not really asked anything of this friendship, this rekindled friendship, except that one message. Like I've not been calling you or even messaging you. Like we arranged something separately, but like this is not a demanding relationship. Like, I'm not messaging you every day being like, I can't do this, blah, blah, blah. Right? It was one thing. Just like that again said to me like, oh, she never had any intention of being my friend because I asked her one thing. You're supposed to be able to go to your friends if you have a question about something or you want their advice or you're struggling. You're supposed to be able to send them like a 2-line message and be like, hey, what do you think about this? Or hey, I need some help on this. That's like something that you're definitely supposed to be able to do with your friends. So for her to be like, I'm not the friend you need me to be, I'm like, oh, okay, so you're not willing to do anything to be my friend at all. It's a shame, but I'm kind of glad it happened this way because now I know for sure, right? I know for definite that we're not supposed to be friends. Whereas if I had never replied to any of the messages, so I said she contacted me twice, if I'd not replied to either of them, whereas as I said I replied to the second one, but if I'd not replied to either of them, maybe I would have still been like, oh, maybe I should get back in touch with this person, oh, you know. But now I know for sure, I'm like, oh no, things didn't work, and for a reason, you know. I would say if you have let someone back into your life, the final step, if you've let someone back in and you regret it, please forgive yourself. If it's gone badly and you're like, oh, why did I do this? Or why am I so silly? I should have known better. It's fine. Forgive yourself. Especially if they were the one to get back in touch. You might have been like, oh, this maybe shows that they, you know, this isn't me making stuff up. This is literally them coming back to me and being like, hey, shall we be friends again or whatever? That's not your fault then if you take them at their word and are like, oh, sure. Right? They took the action to get back in touch with you. It's not unreasonable for you to then be like, oh, maybe I should reconsider this. Please forgive yourself and don't beat yourself up for expecting more than what they were able to give you. Because this thing of like, oh, have low expectations and then you'll never be disappointed. Obviously, I think for a lot of situations that can be helpful in terms of not building things up and accepting things as they are instead of like the imagined version. If you're trying to plan like the perfect day and then you expect it to be amazing or you expect it to make you feel a certain way, like, oh, this is gonna fix me, like that I'm gonna be happy, I'm gonna be whatever, and then something goes wrong during the day and you're like, oh no, the day is ruined, this has all gone badly wrong. Like your expectations were so high that then the day couldn't live up to it. So I'm not saying like have these high expectations, but also I think for friendships, the idea of having like low expectations, like I do think we should be able to expect some things from our friends. Like you should be able to expect a response. You should be able to expect some support if you're struggling. Not if you're like badgering people or like every single day texting them. But like if once in a while you're like, hey, can you help with this? And they can't. Like that's not you expecting too much. That's literally them being a bad friend. Take what you can from the situation. Try and learn something from it. So from this, I have learned to trust my initial reaction. Because initially, when she first texted me, I was like, there is no way I'm getting back in touch with this person. Like, why would I do that to myself? They hurt me so much. So I have learned to listen to my initial reaction because the second time when they texted me and I was like, oh, sure, let's get back in touch with them. I've now, all of these feelings that I had done well to heal from by myself have been brought up again. Obviously, I can deal with that, but it's just annoying. Like, I'm annoyed at this person still because I'm like, I had healed from the way you treated me and I'd got over that. And now you come back into my life and stir all of this stuff up again. And then I had to deal with it all over again for a second time. Like, who do you think you are? It's so unfair. It's not my job to make you feel better about the way you treated me. Like, it's not my job to give you closure on that. I gave myself closure. I didn't need to speak to you about it. I sorted that stuff by myself. I dealt with it all by myself because you decided you weren't going to be there anymore. And then you feel bad about it. So you come back a few months later and are like, oh, can we be friends again? Oh, I'm so sorry. And then you're not actually there to be a friend. You're just there for me to make you feel better. Like, it's so disrespectful. I forgive myself for getting back in touch with them and for thinking the best. But I don't know if I forgive them yet, you know? That was really mean. I shouldn't have let them back in. But also, I kind of admire myself for being so open to that and like half trusting that things might be better. We can take lessons from what we've been through and try and not let the same thing happen again. But then life is also this series of lessons and people being annoying and things always changing and dynamics always changing. So who knows? I hope some of what I've shared has resonated. I'm really sorry if you're going through the same thing, but maybe the lesson that we can take forward is do not let them back into your life. If someone comes back, really think about why. And this is not to say like become isolated and don't talk to anyone and distrust everyone. Like you can still be really open and earnest. Like I am really earnest, but I can also be, I think, maybe gullible or like I can think too much the best of people. We sometimes do need to consider the other motivations people can have for getting back in touch. Don't beat yourself up. Don't let them back into your life. Take something from this and move forward. Try not to let this like make you really bitter. But also if you feel that way for a while, I think that's okay. And just let yourself process it. And remember, there's nothing wrong with you. This is just the combination of you and this other person is not a good one. But that doesn't mean that you're not a good friend, or that you're not a good person, or that you're going to be alone forever, or all of this. Like, it doesn't have to be this self-pity thing. It's like, oh, that didn't work out. Okay, we move on. I will leave my friendship breakups video. It's 6 tips to heal getting over a friendship breakup. I will also leave a video about friends in your 20s because this is difficult. I'm so sorry if you related, but you will be okay. God bless. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.